Hi ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to record a quick video reviewing the Early American Geography Additional. So there is a study guide that I'd like for you to open and follow along with. It'll look just like this. When you go to Summit, let me scroll up to the top here. When you go to Summit, you'll see CEMS class materials. I have this study guide posted twice. One is at a PDF. And the other one is as a Google Doc. You probably want to use the Google Doc. That way you can type in answers to this study guide as we go along. I highly encourage you to listen to this video, fill out the study guide, and you may use this on your assessment. Okay, so let's go over Objective 1. Objective 1 asks us to describe the country's physical landscape and location of states during the first 4 presidents. So all of this additional, everything we're talking about is pretty much the Louisiana Purchase, which we know was purchased by President Thomas Jefferson in the very, very early 1800s from Napoleon Bonaparte of France. And the Louisiana Purchase was so important because it really doubles the size of the United States. It gives the United States access to the Mississippi River. It gives the United States access to ship goods out of the port of New Orleans. So it's a hugely important purchase for the sake of trade. It allows farmers to ship their goods, make money. But then it also was important because it led to expansionism. And all throughout this year, we've talked about how important westward expansion was in the development of the United States. Its impact on Native Americans, the causes of the Civil War as states expand, and slavery becomes a big question. So really, the Louisiana Purchase is arguably one of the most key events in American history that really shaped our country, both physically, but also economically and politically, to be what we know today. All right, so list the 3 main regions of the country during the first 4 presidents. So in general, when we divide the country during the 1800s, we think of the North, which would have been the free states. Typically any state north of the Ohio River. The second region would be the South. Those would be the slave states. Any state south of the Ohio River. So Kentucky, for example. And then the West, that would be the third region, is the West. And the West would be anything west of the Mississippi River. For a long time, much of that land was called the Northwest Territory, and then later the Louisiana Purchase. And ultimately, this huge chunk of land will be divided up into 14 states. So there's a lot of division of this land over time. All right, so your 3 regions, North, South, and West. So explain how the Louisiana Purchase changed the United States. We know that Napoleon of France sold the land. He sold the land because he was trying to make money to fund his wars in Europe. And so he wanted to just get rid of his French colonies, make some quick cash, and focus on his goals of taking over Europe. And what results is the United States gains a huge chunk of land for a really, really good price. In the end, the Louisiana Purchase will be divided into 14 states. And the total square miles is around 900,000. So that's 900,000. And that's 900,000 square miles. Now, there were a few political challenges. The first was, did Thomas Jefferson even have the authority as president to just buy land from France? That was a big question. No one knew yet if the president could do that. Another political challenge was the issue of slavery. So slavery expanding west doesn't become a huge problem right away, but over time, decade after decade, as new states are being added to the country, the question will be, do those states get to have slavery, or are they going to be free states? And that will lead to many different compromises. Remember the Missouri Compromise, eventually the Compromise of 1850, over how in the world do we add states and keep a balance of slave and free states. So the key bodies of water that we gained were the Mississippi River. That is really the heart of the country. It flows north to south. So many states have access to the Mississippi River. So important for shipping goods within the country, and then shipping goods all the way down the river to New Orleans, where those goods could then be shipped out into the Atlantic Ocean. So we gained access to the Mississippi River and the port of New Orleans on the Gulf of Mexico. So explain the difference between northern and southern economies. Hopefully we're pretty familiar with this. The North had a cold climate. They couldn't grow a lot of things, so they are really a factory economy. They make final products. They did some shipping, they did some trade, but in general, they're focused on manufacturing. The North was also free states. The South is kind of the opposite. The South is rural. The South is a lot warmer, so you can grow crops for longer periods of time. And as a result, the South will really be dominated by that plantation agriculture, using slave labor to produce crops like cotton and tobacco, which would then be shipped to the North and made into a final product. How did physical geography impact the kind of economic activities done in each region? Give some examples. Well, we kind of just talked about that. So the North, much colder. Makes sense to do factories instead of farming. The South, much warmer, so growing things works better. All right, so that is Objective 1. Objective 2, describe the territorial expansion that took place during the terms of the first 4 presidents. So here's another question that we've pretty much covered. Why were rivers such a key part of the early U.S. economy? Shipping and trade. Shipping and trade. You could trade goods like cotton and tobacco and ship those up north and then ship final products back down to the south. You could ship goods down to New Orleans and send them out to Europe. And also you could trade slaves. People could travel. So rivers were a huge part of connecting the country early on. So what are some examples of how economic programs implemented by the... Sorry, I think this is kind of a confusing question. What are some examples of how the economic programs implemented by the U.S. government in the early 1800s helped expansion? I'm going to add that. Sorry. So a couple things. People could get easier access to credit. So the government has a bank. They're providing loans to people. That's encouraging them to buy land. They also had just really good land policy. So the U.S. government was making laws that would encourage people to go westward, that would make it affordable for people to buy land. All right, now earlier we talked about rivers being that key piece of expansion west, but what we'll see is over time transportation will improve. So not only is the government helping people buy land, but now transportation's helping with expansion as well. So we don't have to rely on just rivers, because over time better roads will be built, roads that aren't so muddy and will just wash away and your wagon would get stuck. We're going to build better roads. Turnpikes are going to be built. So turnpikes are much, much nicer roads. Oftentimes maybe they'd be paved with stone or brick. Much more durable, going to be much more easier to drive across in your wagon. And then finally, also canals are going to be built during this time. So we think about the Erie Canal. You might have heard of that. It's up in New York. It connects two bodies of water that would have originally been separated by land. So it's a thin channel of water that's man-made that boats can get from one side of a piece of land to the other. So hugely important for shipping goods. All right, what contributed to a boom in land sales? Well, first off, the U.S. government was making laws that made it very easy for people to go out west and settle the land. So people could go west, they could afford the land. Some examples of government programs was dividing the land into like 80-acre plots, which at the time was a small amount of land and relatively affordable for a small farmer. So dividing land into smaller plots, that would be one. Allowing farmers to buy a minimum of 80 acres. That was very affordable. And then offering loans and credit through the Bank of the United States. So actually helping people have the money through a loan from the bank to buy land in the West. So all of those things are encouraging people to go westward. All right, and finally, in terms of shipping, how did the Louisiana Purchase benefit farmers? Once again, that Mississippi River, so important, allowing farmers to ship their goods and make money. It was a huge part of the economy. So just a few more key points here. When you take this assessment, just remember, the Louisiana Purchase was very successful. It helped double the size of the United States pretty much overnight. So with Jefferson signing the treaty, the United States is doubled. That's a huge, huge gain for the United States. It was going to help Congress make money by selling the land off, so as a moneymaker. It granted farmers and different businesses access to the river, Mississippi River, to allow for shipping. In all, it's considered a huge success, but we know that the Louisiana Purchase will kind of set our country up for a dark history, pushing Native Americans out of the South and moving them west. And then, of course, the big issue with the expansion of slavery, which will ultimately lead to the Civil War.